This is all about Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin, little b for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B for the network, a collective journey to understand, apply, and use this information, all Bitcoin, all the time. I'm your host, Christine Lee. Let's have a live look at Bitcoin. The CoinDesk Bitcoin price XVX index currently trading at 61,200 and change. Bitcoin slightly up about 0.6% over the past 24 hours. The most reliable reference prices since 2014 are now published under the CoinDesk brand, trusted globally as the leader in crypto news, events, and data.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
All right. Bitcoin slightly up in the hour, stuck in a range between $60,000 and $63,000 on Friday, even after the release of the strong U.S. jobs report showing payrolls rising by over 500,000 jobs and the unemployment rate falling to 4.6%. BTC's price has been little changed all week, and investors diversify into altcoins, some of which breached all-time highs like ETH, Solana, and Avalanche this week. Taking a look at the Bitcoin dominance chart here, which shows the extent of BTC's dominance over the rest of the market, it appears Bitcoin's dominance is declining as altcoins take a larger share of the crypto market cap. Stack Fund saying, quote, this trend will likely persist for the short term as they've seen consistent bids for layer one tokens throughout any market weakness. Coins related to virtual worlds or so-called metaverses were also in the spotlight after Facebook said it will change its name to Meta and enter the arena. Mana token, the currency of Decentraland, a virtual world on the Ethereum blockchain, is up 88% on the week. And the Sandbox, also a virtual world where players can build, own, and monetize their gaming experiences, has gained 130. And to see price and other Bitcoin news is our weekend review. Christy Harkin, and marketer on work. Welcome, Christy and Dominic, to the show. Happy Friday.
Hello.
Friday.
Hello. All right. So, Dominic, Bitcoin appears to be very range bound, a little bit boring this week, and Bitcoin dominance is going down. What's going on?
Yeah, it's been a very dull week for Bitcoin, but really exciting for altcoins. And typically you see that happen when there's a greater investor appetite for risk. So when Bitcoin sort of stalled out and stabilized after the sell-off earlier this year, there was a slight demand for Bitcoin relative to altcoins. But then once that rally picked up over the past month, altcoins really showed their outperformance. So you saw new highs in like Ethereum and Solana, just showing that investors have been rotating to where there's greater upside potential.
Mm-hmm. So with these all-time highs to Solana with other altcoins, is this natural after a Bitcoin all-time high, or are altcoins, do you think, establishing themselves for their use cases?
A little bit of both. The risk on hasn't really been there for cryptocurrencies for the most part of this year after the sell-off that occurred in May. Or in March. So, what happens now is that as investors start deploying more of their cash back into the market, they tend to go towards those higher beta or higher sensitive to risk assets. Those are the altcoins in the crypto market. So they're benefiting from that. And then also, a lot of the hype and excitement over, the Facebook news that you mentioned earlier, DeFi activities and NFT. There's a lot of other use cases out there that folks are looking for. And they're just adding that to their crypto portfolio to see future advantages.
Mm-hmm. And any impact from the Fed report this week? We saw that the Fed's latest policy decision was that they would begin tapering this month about $15 billion in asset purchases per month asset purchases are at 180 billion. So it has some time to deplete before it has an impact, but the reaction perhaps may have some sort of reaction from the markets.
Yeah, it did. So as soon as that release came out, or the announcement from the FOMC, we saw a dip down about 3 to 5%, and then Bitcoin really held at 60 handle and came right back up. And I think a lot of that news have been priced in. You saw in the traditional market, short end of the rates have been really surging, and that shows that the market has been expecting the Fed to scale back its asset purchases. it's a long road, like you mentioned. It doesn't mean that there's going to be a rate hike, right? It just means that they're slowing the rate of asset purchases. And those have been unprecedented from the pandemic. So there's been a lot of support for risk assets from that greater liquidity from the Fed. Now, the worry with that is that next year, when they do start tapering and lower and, tightening monetary policy, what happens is correlations start to rise. So you tend to see sort of a flight to safety from risk assets, and that might be troubling. But for now, quarter four remains strong for risk assets. So we're seeing that heavy bid, and the markets have sort of been adjusting to right now, the slow rate of tightening of policy.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's turn to the health of the Bitcoin network. But actually, first, we did also screen a bit of a teaser yesterday of the Navajo Nation, which are starting to build mining data centers, Bitcoin data centers on their territory, and it's just pretty remarkable. They've faced generations of exploitation. They've been abused financially by the U.S. government, and now they're trying to take a step in the right direction for their own culture and community in trying to establish a bit of their own sovereignty with Bitcoin, their financial stability with Bitcoin in these mining facilities. So a pretty remarkable short film by our Compass Mining CoinDesk contributor colleague Will Foxley there. But expanding mining operations and acquisitions, Christy, it's a theme throughout the crypto industry, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And because it is a theme that's running through the industry right now, we are seeing the hash rate for Bitcoin increasing. And the hash rate, if you recall from previous episodes and discussions, is the total combined computational power that is used to mine and process transactions on a proof of work blockchain like Bitcoin. And the higher the hash rate, the more secure the blockchain is. Now, Bitcoin is pretty darn secure. We saw that because there was a massive drop in hash rate in May when the miners in China started shutting down because of regulation problems. And yet the mining industry thrived in spite of that. And now what we're seeing is that the hash rate is really recovering nicely at a very steady pace. The difficulty has adjusted upward for the 8th consecutive 2-week period on Sunday. And the difficulty adjustment is a pretty good measurement because the higher the hash rate, the easier it is to mine Bitcoin, or for Bitcoin to be mined, because there's a lot of machines doing it. So they have to make it a little tougher in order for the blocks to be produced at a steady rate. We're now a little more than halfway back to the levels seen in May, right before China started shutting everything down. The hash rate is 200. It was 200 exahashes per second in May, dropped to 76, up to 169. So we're down. We went from 200 way down to 76, and we're all the way back up to 169, which is pretty darn good. And this week alone, we've had several reports from miners, mostly North America, that have demonstrated that they are contributing to this growth. For example, Canadian Bitcoin miner Bitfarms has plans to grow its mining capacity to more than 2 exahashes per second in November after hitting a record hash rate last month. And it plans to achieve 3 exahashes of mining power per second by the end of the first quarter of 2022 and 8 by the end of 2022. They are constructing new mining facilities, production facilities in Sherbrooke, Quebec, that should be completed in 2 phases through next year, adding 78 megawatts of total power. Argo blockchain has a hash rate of 1.075 exahashes per second, and it expects its previously contracted purchase of 20,000 Bitmain miners to be delivered starting in the second quarter, which will bring the company's total hash rate capacity to 3.7. Then you've got Compass Mining, the folks behind the video, setting up miners in the Navajo reservation. They have just signed a new deal with Canadian Red Jar Digital, which will add 140 megawatts to their capacity. doubling it. Marathon has added 27,280 active miners. They are now at 2.96 exahashes. Well, they now have that total of miners. They're going to be adding more. Riot is adding more. It goes on. And all of these were just reports that came this week. So it's easy to see why the mining hash rate is definitely on the rise.
Yeah, the secure network on the rise is always good for the health of the network. And amid this growth and profitable. And amid this growth, of course, we have a lot of scams happening. The latest one dropping this morning with a phony news release from Kroger saying that they would begin accepting Bitcoin Cash. Did we see that impact the markets at all, Danik?
Yeah, we saw initial spike up in Bitcoin Cash, and then it came right back down. Very similar tactics to the Walmart release that was like a few weeks ago. So, a lot of these things occur when there's froth in the market, but you just gotta, do your due diligence and separate the rumors from the facts.
Mm-hmm. Let's look ahead to next week. Speaking of fraud, so Christy, Craig Wright is taking the stand on Monday, correct? We initially reported it would happen on Thursday, but it's actually been moved. What do we know so far about this trial? Craig Wright, who claims to be Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, versus the David Kleiman estate over 100 million Bitcoins said to be in Craig's possession.
Yeah. It's a lot of Bitcoin. So the estate, what we've been reporting this past week is the trial that is happening right now in Miami. The estate of the late Dave Kleiman, represented by his surviving brother, Ira, is suing Wright for what Ira alleges to be his brother Dave's share of proceeds derived from business arrangements between Craig and Dave. And that includes intellectual property and some Bitcoin that Ira says they mined together, plus the proceeds of other business ventures that they may or may not have been involved in. We're still trying to parse that out. That's what the courts are trying to figure out. So far, it's mostly been testimony from the plaintiff side of things, from Ira's lawyers. They've mostly been trying to paint a picture of Craig Wright as being a unsavory character who has forged documents and doesn't live up to his obligations and doesn't pay people and just generally being a not so great guy. And what we are all waiting for is for Craig Wright himself to take the stand, which was supposed to happen yesterday, but Ira's testimony ended up running long, so we didn't actually hear from him. We'll be hearing from Craig Wright's ex-wife, I believe, is slated to happen this afternoon. We'll see what happens if we get that testimony, but on Monday, we should be able to hear straight from Craig Wright. Now, he can be a very colorful character on the stand. He has been known to lose his temper occasionally. We'll see what happens on Monday. We have our wonderful reporter, Cheyenne Ligon, who is down there in Miami watching the whole thing, reporting for CoinDesk. So make sure to check in and see what she reports on that next week.
It's a riveting case and really interesting. I just based on Cheyenne's reporting, I saw that Gavin Andreessen had come to submit some testimony saying he felt that he was bamboozled by Craig Wright in trying to convince him that he was Satoshi Nakamoto. A lot of folks on the plaintiff side discrediting a lot of the claims that Craig Wright has made throughout his life and business dealings. And so very fascinating to see what Craig has to say in his defense. Dominic, taking a look at the markets, what do you see in store for next week? We also have some Coinbase earnings that are out. Square had some earnings out this week, and they turned out very well in terms of their Bitcoin profits for the company. Do we see something similar happening for Coinbase?
Yeah, all eyes are on Coinbase. I think they missed earnings last quarter. So this quarter, there's a lot of expectation for trading volumes to perhaps pick up. We saw the rally in Bitcoin over the past month, so that should be beneficial. And it was just not Bitcoin, right? Ethereum, and we talked about the other altcoins that should benefit trading volumes. And Coinbase puts out a newsletter to their institutional clients that we read every week. So we're watching those volumes week by week, and we've been seeing a lot of the altcoins pick up. So there is definitely trading activity, and that should benefit their bottom line. Reading from Square's report, the Cash App showing that there was a lot of Bitcoin transactions. That's also forward-looking, and we'll probably take that as a cue for Coinbase to sort of benefit from that as well. And then overall in the crypto markets, we're looking for some sign of life, some sign of volume picking up. And if it does, then analysts are expecting a break above that resistance level at 64K. And historically, Bitcoin does tend to lag the altcoins on a bullish trajectory. So if that were to happen, the bias is definitely towards the upside with a pickup in volume. We're expecting to see that. If a pullback does occur, there is a lot of support on the chart around 58K, 54K. And that should benefit the Q4 rally.
All right. Well, it's going to be an exciting week next week. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Dominic, for joining me. Appreciate your insights as always. It's our CoinDesk Week in Review panel, Managing Editor of Technology, Christy Harkin, and Markets Reporter, Dominic Dantes. Have a happy Friday and great weekend, you too. That's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Christine Lee. We'll do it all over again on Monday at 3 p.m. Also join me Monday morning at 9 a.m. in New York for First Mover, your first look at the day's global crypto news headlines. You're watching CoinDesk TV.